Hi, it's Irene Weinberg, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. Before we get started with the episode, make sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching so you never miss an episode. Every week, we share heartfelt stories, spiritual insights, and practical guidance to help you navigate grief and trauma, find hope, and discover rebirth after loss. By subscribing, you'll get access to every episode and join our supportive community on this journey. Thanks for being here, and let's dive in. Hi, everyone. I hope this message finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have the pleasure of interviewing Stacey Johnson, who is a woman's empowerment coach, a licensed professional clinical counselor, and a resilience mentor. After experiencing the sudden loss of her husband and stepfather, Stacey transformed her own path of healing into a powerful mission, guiding women through life's most difficult transitions. With deep expertise in emotional resilience, nervous system regulation, and cognitive restructuring, she equips women with practical tools to steady themselves in any circumstance, silence self-doubt, and step forward with confidence and ease. Through her signature frameworks, the Resilience Roadmap and the Beacon Blueprint, Stacey masterfully blends science-based strategies with emotional mastery and profound inner work. Her approach empowers high-achieving women to live fully anchored in their authentic selves, reclaiming intimacy, presence, and joy. Stacey is also the visionary founder of Anchor Resilience, an illumination journey, her 12-week group coaching program designed for women navigating grief or life-altering transitions. This transformative experience helps participants break free from overthinking, regulate their emotions, and restore their presence, both personally and professionally. I'm looking forward to talking with Stacey, who is joining me from Concord Township, Ohio, and she tells me it's snowing like crazy over there, about the sudden loss of her husband and stepfather, her healing journey that inspired her to empower women through life's storms, and what happens when our nervous systems become stuck. We'll also discuss common misconceptions about healing and emotional resilience, learn about her signature frameworks, the Resilience Roadmap and the Beacon Blueprint, explore Stacey's 12-week group coaching program, and more. This promises to be an illuminating conversation that not only honors the pain of loss, but also celebrates the resilience, healing, and transformative power of reclaiming your life, beautifully echoing the mission and spirit of Grief and Rebirth podcast. Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, Stacey. A warm welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Hi, Irene. Thank you for having me today.
I think we're going to help a lot of people, and you have so much to teach and share. So let's start by having people know your story. Just share your experience with the sudden loss of your husband and your stepfather, which absolutely turned your life upside down.
Yes. It was a whirlwind of a month that we experienced back in 2021. I was a therapist working in a special education school, and I got a phone call on the morning of October 29th. It was actually my husband was calling the school office telling me, hey, your mom's been trying to get a hold of you. I was not allowed to have a cell phone in my classrooms. And so, but he knew the office phone, and he knew that that was the best way to get a hold of me. And I said, "Okay." And he says, I think it's Dave," which was my stepfather. And he said, "Call me back when you know something." So my mom had shared that, my stepfather was unresponsive that morning and that they were at the hospital. She did not already share with me that he was already pronounced dead. And she told me what hospital he was at. And I call my husband. He says, "I'll be there, shortly. I'm going to close up what he was doing and I'll meet you there." So, of course, we get to the hospital and the whole family was there. And we were very, very grateful because this was during COVID still, in 2021. And they weren't allowing family to come into hospital rooms. They were only allowing one visitor. But because of the circumstances of, they allowed the whole family to come into my stepfather's room so that we could say our goodbyes. And so we did that and we went through the funeral. Well, let's back up just a couple days before the funeral. The night of his passing, my brother and I were the last ones to leave the hospital room with my mom because she did not want to leave. She was in shock. And so when we were able to get her home, she then is in AFib. She can't get her heart to, she's telling us that she's having a hard time breathing, all this stuff. So my brother and I basically got back in the car and went back to the emergency room. We had gone to a different emergency room than where he was because her heart doctor was with a different hospital system. So we get to that hospital. The emergency room is packed. I mean, absolutely packed. And they wouldn't let me go in with my mom. They said, and my mom immediately turned around and says, "I'm done. I'm out. I'm out." I'm like, what are we going to do? My brother was trying to find parking because it was that bad. It was that packed. And so, I basically waved him down. We got back in the car and I said, "Go back to the other hospital that we were at, that the hospital that we were with my stepfather." So we drove there and they took her right back. The hospital was not as packed as the other one. And they let us to go with her. And because they had just seen us 3 hours earlier, they had just seen us leave with her. So they let us go in and she was showing signs of a heart attack. And the blood work was coming back fine, or the EKG, something came back fine, but everything else was showing like that she was having a signs. And so they admitted her to the hospital. And so she stayed the night. And then the next morning, they wanted to keep her and do like some more testing. And she said at that point, she was more aware of everything. The AFib had, she had gotten, everything was more regular. And she's like, "I need to go home and start planning. I have,
I think she was suffering from a broken heart is what it feels like to me.
Yes, that's kind of like the broken heart syndrome is what they but she did end up having the 2 days after the funeral, they did bring her in to do well, it wasn't 2 days after the funeral. It was a few days after the funeral. They did a test and they did find that she needed a stent. So, it was probably a blessing that she had all these things tested. So we had his funeral and the night of his because we had broke it down into 3
By the way,
steps.
I just want to ask you, Stacey, were you close to him?
I was very close to him.
Okay, so he'd been in your life for a long time.
Yes, my parents had been married for like 35 years, the two of them, yeah. Very close. I met him when I was like 11 years old.
Oh my, oh my.
And so I was very close to him. And then the night of his last service, the gravesite service, my husband says, "I don't feel so good."
Oh my God.
And I said, "No, no, no, no. This can't be happening." And then Tuesday morning, I went back to work because we had done our 5 days of bereavement leave. I go back to work and I call him. Oh yeah, because that was the day of my mom. So Tuesday, the day after the funeral, my mom, was admitted to the hospital because they put a stent in. And
The hospital that you couldn't get in originally with her doctor?
yep, yep. So I call him and I said, I'm leaving work because I was called from work by my uncle saying they're gonna admit her. So I'm leaving to go up to the hospital and be with her. And he says, I'm headed home. I feel like a truck hit me. I feel awful. My body's aching. I think I have a fever. And at the time, COVID was pretty, and they were giving away free tests at the local library. And I said, okay, well, I'm on my way home. I'll hit the library, get a test. And our daughter was working evenings at the time, and she was working in a nursing home. So I got home, handed her the test, and said, test your father. I got to get stuff ready to go up to the hospital to meet grandma. By the time I finished getting all my stuff ready to go to be at the hospital, he was positive for COVID. The test had come back and he was positive for COVID. And fast forward a week and a half later, he had passed.
Oh my God.
So, a week later, I had put him in the hospital. And when we took him to the hospital, that was the last time that, they allowed me to come in, very brief moments to go visit him. It was like literally garb it all up, like literally everything. I had to, and got to speak with him for a few minutes. And I had, and then he was in the hospital a week and a half. So between this time my stepfather passed away to the time my husband passed away was 3.5 weeks.
My goodness.
And at the time, my oldest was 20 and my youngest was 17. And so,
The other thing I'm thinking is that with what happened to you, you and your mother became widows together, like in such a short period of time and completely unexpected.
right.
So now you lose these two pivotal people in your life, and you should know better, but you're unraveling, you're in grief. So what did that look like for you?
What did it look like? To be honest, Irene, and now I know this is not what I should have done, but my nervous system, the way my unraveling looked like overdoing. I was so used to keeping the schedule, keeping everything had to be in control, right? I have to keep it and so I just kept doing. So I went back to work. I worked for a school. So my husband passed away the day before Thanksgiving, which means we had that longer winter, like Thanksgiving break. And only a few weeks later was going to go into winter break. So my boss was very, very, I was very grateful. I had tons of sick time anyways. So I didn't go back until January 1st, right after the winter break. But that felt normal to me to go back to work. I've had other, friends of mine that took months off because of losing their spouse. And it felt normal to go back to work and keep that schedule. I thought if I go back to work, then it looks like I'm doing fine and my kids will continue. I had a kid in high school. I had a senior in high school, another one that was, working full time. And I'm like, this is what we do. You just go back to normal.
Right. But what was really going on in there that you were pushing away by being so busy?
Right. I pushed away all the real feelings. I never really felt, the grief or the fear. I mean, there was tons of overthinking in regards to, what's going to happen, how am I going to take care of things? How am I going to We went into the winter season. He was my snowplower.
Oh my God.
I have a foot of snow that came out today. In the last 12 hours, we've had a foot of snow drop in our area. And when he was alive, I never would have feared, like, what do I do? So, yeah, I had to
You
figure
have
all
to
those
change
things
all your
out.
patterns, yeah, all the things, and I'm so relating because I'm a widow too, and my life also was turned upside down, and I mean, I'm so relating to, what you're feeling. So now that you're having all these feelings and you need some help, you recognize that you need some help. Why was that? Did you suddenly have like a nervous, reaction to something while you were busy doing your thing?
No, and I didn't seek out help. It kind of came across probably, the algorithm works in mysterious ways and I was liking some things on my Facebook pages in regards to, grief and being a widow and things like that a grief coach kind of came across, and I went to some of her trainings. I didn't go into a 12-week or a 6-month program, but I went into these kind of containers where it was thinking like, it can't hurt. And it resonated with me. And I started to realize that, yeah, there was all of these what ifs and should haves that were staying stuck. And so doing some of that was when I realized, like, yeah, I have the training. I've been a therapist for 20 years. And so now that I know what really it feels like to experience trauma, I need to use my experience and the knowledge that I had, and now then go into being a coach myself.
Yeah, which it kind of inspires you because now you have the personal experience, right?
Right.
So that was the moment that you realized your life had to change, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I was with attended some of her trainings, and I was like, "These are things that I already know, like, you needed to get it together," I needed to I had to start doing some things, letting things go, emotionally instead of holding things on, because the nervous system can get stuck. We can get stuck in that cycle of do, 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 do. For me, that's what it looked like. For some people, it can look different. We all have different we're all made up differently. And so, and it looked like trying to keep control, and it looked like, sometimes irritability. And so for me, I realized that, yeah, I was resonating. And so my nervous system was stuck because I was stuck in this cycle of overthinking in
Right.
regards to all the what ifs. And
Right. It must have been great for your sleep.
to be honest, my sleep has never really been affected, but where I would feel it is I would always have tension in my shoulders, my neck. I walked around with headaches all the time. Now I haven't had a headache in, yeah, a couple years.
That's great. So you decide you're going to help women to navigate the storm you're going through yourself. And I know that there are misconceptions people have about healing or emotional resilience. So, do you want to talk to us about that path? Because now you're starting to heal yourself, and you probably have all these things that you've learned, but it doesn't necessarily follow the way it's ordained to follow. So, you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. Yeah. And people's resilience to healing there's so many misconceptions. If I heal, then I'm going to forget, or I'm going to forget, especially if they have this tragic loss, like you and I, Irene, like becoming a widow. But I've worked with other women that also have suffered loss of, identity, or a loss of themselves, loss of just, maybe they've gone through a divorce. If I heal, then one, I may forget, one, if we're a widow, forget that person that we lost, because healing may mean that I forget, or the healing is that, or I'm fine. Like, because if someone would have said to me at first, you know, you need to heal more, I would have said, no, I'm fine. Look at, I go to work. My kids are doing well. I've got an A student. I'm, doing well. I'm figuring out all the problems. I got a snowplow guy. I've done this. My daughter was racing four-wheelers at the time. My husband was her mechanic, her driver, like, everything. And, I figured out how to continue her racing for that year. I just took everything on. And if there was a problem, figured it out, you know, but
But
there was
meanwhile,
still,
inside, your emotional
yeah.
being is not being addressed, right? So where's all this going that you're pushing away? Doesn't that lend to illnesses and things later on if you keep suppressing?
Oh, yes, it will lead to, if we don't regulate our nervous system, if we keep pushing feelings down, they stay. They'll stay stuck. I was actually just, I'm working with another mentor right now, and I didn't even realize that I had some other feelings of fear stuck inside, and so, like this fear of actually, disappointing my husband. if I heal or if I move on and so I had to learn how to let go of some of these feelings that we've keep stuck and if we keep them stuck, it will cause havoc. When people are like seeing doctors and they can't come up with a real medical diagnosis for things, that's most likely their nervous system is over dysregulated.
I can definitely relate to that. I absolutely experienced that too. What do you call emotional resilience, Stacey?
I have a 30-day healing or emotional transformational program that I work with women. And in that journey, we touch on learning all about emotions. So I identify emotional resilience as one is learning really what is feelings. What are they?
What the heck is going on with you with that you're right?
Being able to label them, because if someone says, "Hey, how are you today?" and you're like, "Fine," that really doesn't tell me your feelings. And usually, fine means I just don't want to talk about it. And we're just going to keep stuffing it down. And so, emotional resilience is one, being really aware of our emotions and then being able to be okay with them. Being okay with, yeah, there was fear. Like when I recognized that I had this fear and I was like, okay, all right, thanks. But now I've got it. Like,
Well, it feels to me like a lot of women, I know a lot of women are raised and we're people pleasers and we take care of everybody else. And it comes a time when you're going through something like that, that it's time to love yourself. And if you don't love yourself and take care of yourself and heal yourself, it's gonna lead to other things. I mean, I don't see healing as something that you never forget the person you love, but now it's not your complete story of your life. Now it's like,
like,
this right? Are you agreeing with me? This enriched me. This was so wonderful. But now what? What's next, right? So a woman comes to you and she's all upset. She's got all these issues. And I know you work with them with this resilience roadmap and you have a beacon blueprint. Could you tell us about both of those?
yes. My Beacon Blueprint is a strategy that I use with some of the science backed techniques that I have, learned through having a master's in counseling and being a licensed clinical counselor is cognitive behavioral techniques. So I use techniques that are science backed along with, because we have to change our thoughts along with the somatic techniques to regulate our nervous system. If we're not doing both, then it may feel like it's regulated, but it's not always because there's always those thoughts that are still can get that nervous system
Get
dysregulated.
that blood pressure up, get all of that stuff going on, right?
So that's what happens inside my Beacon Blueprint is that I use both techniques. And then in the resilience roadmap, it is a structure of, one, regulating that nervous system, but also involves boundaries, learning to be able to have boundaries and recognize that it's okay. When you're talking about that people pleasing, yeah, it's okay to maybe say no and not feel guilty about it. It is giving them the tools to, yeah, self love. And
Right?
so,
Take care of themselves, and then they can better take care of those people in their lives, right?
right.
So right? And you also have this 12-week group coaching program called your Anchor Resilience and Illumination Journey, which that would catch me right away. I would like that. Designed to spark profound transformation. So how is this an immersive experience? And why do you feel that it empowers especially high achieving women to connect with their authentic selves?
Yeah, because I identified myself as a high achieving woman, because I was working. I was working 45 to 50 hours when my husband passed away. And so I continued to use those high achieving things to avoid a lot of those feelings. And so that's why I feel I'm attracted to those high achieving women because I can relate to them. And inside my anchor, yeah, it's a 12-week program.
So wait a minute. I just want to ask you. So it's a high achieving woman, but it's not like she's the CEO of a company. It's a high achieving woman who's very empowered within her own life, right?
Yeah, like she's the one that, is doing it all. The woman that is, holding everything together. I call them they are the CEOs, but they're the CEOs of their household.
Right, right, right. That's so true. That is so true.
They may not have, a CEO out of home work title, but at home, they are the CEO. They are managing everybody's schedules. They don't know how to say no because, I'll take it on. I can do it again. I can do it.
And
That's what
they
I
got
was
all these
doing.
feelings and they're pushing them away because they got a lot to do.
Right. The to-do list keeps happening, but we ignore our own true self and we ignore our own emotions.
Yes. So
And
so through this Anchor Resilience program, how do you help them? So like say a woman here is listening, she says, maybe this is something I should do. How do you get them from sacrificing their being to loving themselves and nurturing and taking care of themselves? What does that look like?
yeah, it's a combination of everything that we kind of already talked about. We do a lot of work in regards to recognizing emotions. I use an emotional wheel. We get in tune to, labeling the emotions and sitting with our emotions, allowing ourselves to sit there and really allow it to feel and recognizing. And then we do a lot of work in regards to cognitive restructuring because there's so many thoughts. The people pleasing comes usually not when we've experienced this loss. It has been something that's been ingrained in us years and years and years. And on top of women are natural people pleasers to begin with because we're caregivers. That's kind of, we've been,
How we're programmed.
yeah, that's how we are programmed to do it. And so we dive really into all the thoughts that and these faulty beliefs that we carry around and change those beliefs. And then we look at boundaries and we look at what brings us joy, and we set up a self-care plan that puts joy into their life.
That's fabulous. That's so wonderful. I mean, you must get women in one situation, they're totally like transformed when they come out of your program, right? They're not that thought's coming and they're going, that's not, this is the better thought. I'm not going there, right? Because
Right.
how you think really affects your emotions also.
It does. It does. Yep.
It really? So you've got a story to share with us about your client who couldn't make decisions on her own after her husband passed and how working with you changed her life. Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
She originally came to me because she was dealing with a lot of anxiety. I mean, it was originally because of the grief of her husband. She was like, but then as we started to work together, she realized that she had that people pleasing, these internal thoughts that I'm not good enough. And she had tremendous amount of fear. Like when she came to me, she couldn't even walk into the grocery store without this fear that everybody around was judging her or something tragic was going to happen while she was at the grocery store. And by the time, so when we worked together, we did the 12 weeks of cognitive restructuring, the emotional feelings. And by the time she sent a picture to me after a couple weeks after she finished the program, and while she was working with me, she had made the decision to put an addition onto our house, hired the contractor, made the decision what colors to use, and then she sent me a picture after we finished to kind of thank me, and she had sent this picture of these tile pictures that she just hung up, and she's like, I just put them. I didn't, like I just placed them on the wall and this is how it came out and I love it. And I said, and that's all that matters is that you love it.
So you were even that's how she was finding joy, which is wonderful, right? And how is what you do different from therapy? Because you say that the strategies you teach save a person years of mental health treatment. And, self-help books are really nice, but I find they're really great and they're really inspiring, but you really need someone to help you cement that into your being. I think
Well, and I use a lot of mindfulness. I teach a lot of mindfulness. I use a lot of energy work, and so we're looking at this moment. And yes, we may have in years of therapy, when we're working in therapists, and I'm not ditching a therapist, I'm a therapist. I've been in therapy. I still see some private practice therapy clients, but a lot of times I have therapy clients that are, you know, it's, they can be in therapy for a couple years because it's not always just about this moment. They are start coming in and they unravel years and years and years. And in my coaching, I'm giving them the skills to, manage what's happening right this moment and take those skills to continue working. And in therapy, a lot of times we're kind of going way back under. And in coaching, we don't need that like my client that came to me in the 12 weeks, she took the information, came to me with the loss of her husband, realized that she had these thoughts. And we looked at, how do we change these thoughts in more of this moment, you know. I don't care in coaching, we don't try to figure out the why you got that message in your head of that you're not good enough. We just know that it exists now. So let's get the skills to get rid of it in the future.
Right. It sounds like a lot of what you do is behavioral. You're really helping them to identify, uh, negative things that they've been thinking they've been happening and change the process, right, to where they're going.
Yes, I do use some techniques from cognitive behavioral therapy. We use I use somatic techniques to help
And by the
regulate
way,
the
for
nervous
those who are
system.
listening who don't understand what a somatic anything is, that's body. Somatic is how it reacts to our body, right?
Yes,
Affects our
yes. I give
body.
techniques to more like help to regulate our nervous system with grounding tools or, even emotional freedom tapping. But somatic techniques can be just learning how to do like a box breathing. I give them different breathing tools. I usually end every coaching call with some form of, either breathing or a meditation or a mindfulness. So then it's things that they can continue to take with
That's
them.
great. That's great. That's a tool. You're giving them a good tool. Do you have a special offering for members of our audience today?
Yes, there's a free guide. It's called Grief to Grace. And inside there is, just an kind of like a quick quiz or assessment to kind of see where are we with our, emotions and grief. And there is some journaling prompts to kind of take you a little bit deeper, and then a meditation. They'll have access to a meditation. And after they go through that guide, if they feel the call to reach out to me, then they have a link to book a, free session so we can kind of go through that Grief to Grace book one-on-one and see if it resonates to move further either into one-on-one coaching, my 30-day emotional healing, or the 12-week program.
That's great. That's great. And we'll definitely provide a link to that, all of that in our show notes. And what is the famous Stacey Johnson message about the importance of healing that you'd like to share with our listeners? Why should they pull themselves out of this pain they're feeling, which is going to be painful in the beginning?
It's going to be painful. And that's the thing about healing is that there are going to be days that you have a moment, that there's you know, healing doesn't mean we forget, and healing doesn't mean that every day is going to be great. I had a moment a couple nights ago. My daughter and I were watching, you know, a TV show, and an artist came on and was singing a song, and it totally reminded me of my husband. So, of course, tears come. But it did not take me to a place where I don't wanna get out of bed or anything like that. I recognize that, yes, I still love him and I always will, but, healing means that, 1, we can recognize the feelings, but we can have joy. Like, I was very grateful that I was, watching TV with my daughter and just spending that moment, next to a warm fireplace in this snowy blizzard that I'm having.
Well, it feels like how you changed your mindset is not only are you giving yourself permission to have joy in spite of the fact that you're also still grieving in certain ways, but I'm just trying to think about you're filled with gratitude. I really think is that a cognitive shift also?
It's partly mindset too. I do a lot of mindset work, and I start every morning with identifying 3 things that I'm grateful for.
Beautiful.
And I end my day kind of reflecting 3 things that maybe I achieved or brought a smile to my day. So I bookend my day, you know, because I am not allowing the negativity of things to
Yeah.
fill my thoughts.
And you've let so much of that negativity go. It's wonderful. Stacey, you've been so instrumental in empowering women who are navigating grief or life-altering transitions to reclaim their presence, both personally and professionally, with strength and grace. I love talking with you because this is such
Thank
important
you.
information. And I want to thank you for shining a light on resilience, renewal, and the extraordinary power of reclaiming your life. This has been a really inspiring interview, and I wish you abundant blessings.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure. As I like to say, to be continued. Thanks for tuning in to Grief and Rebirth. Remember, you can dive deeper into everything we've discussed by checking out the show notes and all past episodes at ireneweinberg.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and wherever you love to hang out online. Plus, we're on YouTube, so be sure to subscribe and never miss a video. For those of you listening, you'll find links to my 2 books, Good to the Last Drop and They Serve Bagels in Heaven, in the show notes. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see those books listed right above, so don't miss out. And here comes a special treat. If you sign up for Audible as a first-time user using my link, which you can find in the show notes, you can get They Serve Bagels in Heaven for free. And finally, people often ask me what I read, what I use, and what I recommend for healing and self-care. So I've carefully curated a compilation of those items to share with you. You can head over to kit.co/grief and rebirth to check them out. And to my cherished Grief and Rebirth podcast fans, stay tuned and see you again soon. Until next time, many blessings.